Hi. I'm Bobby. I am a robot cat. This is a two-part series entitled Katie and the Cult. This part 1 is a reaction video to one that she uploaded 1 year ago. In this video she appears solo. She dramatically shares the story of how she accidentally ended up in a dangerous cult. Stay tuned tomorrow for part 2. Let us begin.
Guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Thanks for joining me. This will be a little bit of a different video because I just needed to get a few things off my chest. Yesterday I did a video where I shared a side-by-side of a video that was done by Jacqueline Glenn and then another one that was a response by a woman named Morgan.
Spoiler alert. She is about to insert herself into someone else's I joined a cult story. Let us get to it.
Because what better place to actually get things done than to make a video and call out your friends. No, just kidding anyways. So I have to be honest, and this is where we're going to get off sidetracked. But I knew people like Paul and Morgan not too long ago. Like seriously. And like within the last few years.
What the fuck do you keep looking at?
And I was involved with a church that was similar to what they probably go to. Maybe not the same. I would say the version that I was in was a lighter version of what they have, but it's all packaged. It might be packaged differently with the sermons being a shorter period of time and maybe the pastor that I had not being as controversial in what he said, but the underlying sentiment and the underlying doctrine was the same.
This sounds like most organized religion. After all, they do all believe in the same basic creator. Do pay attention to this. It will matter in part 2.
Because my pastor came from a Pentecostal upbringing. Now, I came from a Catholic upbringing, and I spent my entire life in the Catholic Church with my family, my grandparents. My mother went to Catholic school. My grandparents were very involved in their local Catholic church, Holy Family. I attended Mass and Catechism at a church called St. John's. I was baptized, first, confirmation.
Catherine, why are you trying to convince us all you were Catholic?
All the way up communion. I mean, I did everything, right? And my confirmation was kind of the end for me because after all of that time, I decided to become a member of the church. I went through the entire teaching and I realized I didn't like it. The more I learned about the church, the more I learned about the practices, the more I learned about the doctrine, the more I learned about the hierarchy, Rome, the Pope, the saints, all of it. I just didn't agree with it. I didn't agree with the way women were treated. I didn't agree with the way that it was handled in my family. I didn't agree with the way it divided my family. My grandparents were very steadfast in their belief until the very end. And my mom and her sisters, they kind of rejected it. And as they rejected it, it became an issue within our family. And it ultimately divided the family to a point where my grandmother would only, every time we were together, would always talk to us about why we weren't in church, reminding us why we need to be in church. And even at my grandfather's funeral, made some statements that just weren't very flattering about what happened to him and why he passed away. And
You appear to be quite bitter. Although, I am rather confused as to why you are not sharing your priest story in your explanation for leaving the Catholic Church. One would assume that were a large factor.
It's messy, right? And so going through that experience, I never wanted to get back involved in the church. And I was thinking about this because for a long time I just stayed in this place where I was like, I don't know what I believe. I'm not sure. I think there's something, but there's not. And I did a lot of exploring. I was like into rocks for a while. I meditated. I was into yoga. I read about Taoism and Hinduism and all the different Eastern philosophies. And I got to this place where it's like, well, there's so many different beliefs in the world. How is there one that's true? And so
Rocks and yoga classes do not pass for religion, Catherine. But I do believe I understand the point. At this point you do not want to return to Christianity. Fair enough.
I just sort of came to a place where I just was like, I don't believe anything. And then my husband's mother got sick, and then my uncle got sick, and then our family got really rattled by my son's health. And I ended up feeling very vulnerable and very alone. We had just moved to this like sort of rural community where it was great because we could have a larger home and a really good school system for my son, but I didn't have a lot of friends because everyone around us was in church. And so
What do you mean? You had no friends due to all of them being in church? Do you mean that they would not befriend your family if you would not attend their church? An entire neighborhood? Or do you mean they were in church literally 24 hours per day?
So I, maybe indirectly dealing with the grief of what was going on in my family and with my son, was seeking something. I needed a community. I needed something. I needed a place to go. And I needed a sense of, I would have support. I would have friendship. I would have kinship. I would have people that were like-minded. I could connect to and feel a sense of community. Like I was longing for that during that time. And so the only thing that they had out here were churches. And I was like, well, I were in the city. I could do, different social events. They just don't have that here. So more and more,
You act as though you live in a small hut, on a mountain, in the desert. You do not seem to have any troubles commuting to cosmetic stores and plastic surgeons. But, do continue.
I was talking to people in the community and a couple people brought up this one church and, you should just check it out. It'll be very different. I was very reluctant because of what I went through in Catholic, growing up in my Catholic faith. And I was like, I don't want to do another church. But, one of my friends told me about this place. I checked this out. I went on the website. Everything looked very different. The sermons were packaged in a way where it was like you wrote out, it was like a self-help booklet every day for the week with questions and a study guide. And
well, that doesn't sound too culty.
the sermons were taking verses from the Bible and sort of packaging them into a way to help you live a better life, which is really not how the Bible was written. If you know the Bible, it's not designed to be a self-help book, but rather the Word of God. But the way that they packaged it, it
I imagine you apply the Bible to life in order to approve life. You daft woman.
felt like you were taking what the Bible said and using how to implement it. It felt like going to school and having a section where you studied, and then here's the verses, and this is how you apply it. It felt like being a psychology class, and I enjoyed that. And not really thinking about how the verses in context meant or what the actual Bible said, or, I mean, I had read the Bible, but when you're Catholic, some of us don't really read it because the priests go through it in Mass, and, you know, you every year it's like they go through the books, and, you know, everything is very controlled in the Catholic Church. And while some people are very reading their Bibles and stuff, there's a lot of those Catholics that just don't. They just rely on the priests and the community, right?
You have a very biased and bitter recollection of
So this was a
this.
different experience for me, like really getting into the Word, really getting into the Bible. And I went to my first service there, and it was like so, I can't even describe it. I remember I walked in, and it was like it was at a high school or middle school, and it was loud. There was like loud music, which was very different.
So far, this sounds more like a bad review for a single church. Not like a cult survival story at all.
I grew up with hymns, sitting, kneeling, and organs. And this was rock bands, and people had hot coffee, and they were dressed really hipster, and, you know, like cute skinny jeans, and women that had super cute tops on, and lots of cute makeup, and not enough makeup, but just not a ton of makeup, but just enough, and cute clothing that was stylish yet modest, and everyone was.
Are you claiming Catholics do not drink hot coffee or wear makeup? How many years had it been since you'd been to church? You are trying to recreate a childhood as a fundamental Christian. You are not. Catholics wear nice
really
clothes
happy
and
and
makeup,
very welcoming.
Catherine.
And I was at a spot in my life where I needed that, and I remember walking in feeling like, oh my God, I don't have to be alone. And I sat through my first service, and I cried because it had been such a long time since I had been in any sort of church. And I remember feeling guilty because that's what you do when you're Catholic. And I remember feeling like, I want to have this feeling again. I just want to keep having that feeling. I don't know that I wanted to believe. I just wanted to have that feeling.
Dear viewers, she is setting a scene as a brittle and broken lost soul who was fooled by charms of a cult. I assure you, tomorrow's part 2 will be a stark comparison to this mild-mannered recollection.
Because I felt so alone for such a long time. And suddenly I found myself invested and involved in this group. I didn't know anything about their doctrine, very limited. I mean, their website was very, it gave you enough without giving you much. And that's how a lot of these websites and a lot of these sort of rock band churches work, where you feel like you're walking into a modern place where there's modern thoughts and modern feelings, and you won't have to deal with the guilt or the shame or the judgment that comes along with some forms of Christianity. And so I thought I would be safe there. I thought I would make friends there. I thought I could maybe rediscover and explore my faith. And somehow, I don't know how this happened, because I always credited myself for being a very logical, pragmatic thinker, critical thinker.
It sounds as though your glaringly obvious need for attention and control got the best of you.
I got really invested, and I was going to groups all of the time, and I was going to women's groups and Bible studies and home churches, and I was volunteering. And initially what it looked like on the surface was a group of people that were in life together, doing life together.
Now wait. Did you not just say that you joined the church because your young son was dealing with his medical fragility, and you needed support? Were you taking a severely medically fragile child on all of these carpools and Bible studies?
Helping people, supporting one another, helping people live throughout and be their best selves, and without the guilt of, you know, am I going to be part of something that is anti-LGBTQ+? Am I going to be something that's in a system that is patriarchal and anti-women? Those were my biggest concerns. And
having seen my share of your overbearing personality, I find it quite hard to believe you did not address these things from the jump.
And for a while, I was able to ignore things. And then I learned pretty quickly that the pastor, over time, I learned that he came from a Pentecostal background, and he had grown up in the Assemblies of God. And they are very charismatic. They speak in tongues. They're very strict. He grew up not drinking, not drinking alcohol. He and his wife were saved themselves. I don't even know if they kissed before they got married. His children were homeschooled. He and all of their friends homeschooled.
So, you researched the preacher after becoming so involved in the church. And you made a decision about the preacher, based on the way in which he was raised. Carry
Were
on.
ingrained in this. And I started looking around me and I realized every single person in my life was homeschooling their kids. Many of them were very critical of the government. They were apprehensive when they discussed politics, but they were very adamant about their beliefs. People that I never would have been friends with before who were against people in the LGBTQ plus became my friends. People that were anti-choice, which was something I was very not okay with. I had always been a pro-choice kind of girl. And people that were anti-education and suspicious of the public schools, which was crazy to me because my mom was a teacher and my father was on the school board.
Wait, you mean for me to believe that you became such close friends with these churchgoers, and you had no idea that they would have relatively broad and common Christian beliefs? I still fail to see where the word cult applies to
My dad
this.
worked in public health my whole life, and so I was a girl that was all about the public schools. I went to public high school. I went to the public university. I mean, I was all about being secular. And I started watching myself slowly morphing into this thing that I didn't understand. And I started becoming suspicious of school because everyone around me was homeschooling. But everyone didn't look like what I thought. Like I imagined homeschoolers in the Christian world to be like what you see on the Duggars, right? And I imagined the bigotry to be not in a church like that, but it was there. I remember sitting at
Wow. So you believe that not only are all parents who homeschool their children extremely modest dressing, but you believe only Christians homeschool their children. Wow.
a sermon, and my pastor basically saying that men and women should not be friends, and men should be the leader of the church, of the family, and that women must submit to their husbands, and that husbands should not, look online at certain things, and women and men should be very careful about what they do online. And he often talked about how, if you're married and you are friends with another person of the opposite sex, you are basically committing adultery, and men should watch their wives. And it was all packaged in a way where you felt like what you were hearing wasn't what it was. I don't know how to say that, but
Well, I will tell you how you would say that. I am not even a Christian and I can see that this is a grossly exaggerated situation. If you did not agree with the teachings of this very public church, then leave.
it was very old school, let's just say, but yet presented in a way where it didn't feel that way, so you didn't really know what you were hearing. It's hard to explain. But suddenly I started following around my husband, who I'd never been in a situation where I was like, yes, I must submit to you, and like demanding that he lead the family. You need to be our leader. Like you need to come to church too. And I got him involved, and I start working on getting my son in homeschooling. And
Oh come on now, Catherine. That poor bastard is the leader of nothing. It would be safe to assume that you monitor when the man can take a piss.
I'm making bone broth because I'm scared of all of the chemicals, and suddenly we're questioning medicine, and everything that I had once been so steadfast knowing that was okay, I suddenly found myself like in an alternate universe.
During all of this, you had an extremely medically complicated baby. So, you mean to tell me that you were questioning medicine because this alleged cult made you do that? Never mind.
And even when I was in the Catholic Church, this didn't happen, like, at all. At all. I realized that indirectly I got involved with a church that was all about the Spirit, and the Spirit moving within you and controlling you and having a relationship with the Spirit, but not speaking in tongues. So very Pentecostal-like without the tongue speaking.
Did you really just mean to say that Catholics do not focus on the Spirit? Do you truly believe that your viewers are this fucking stupid?
And it was very much people constantly talking about the Holy Spirit working within them, speaking through them, guiding them to do things, moving them towards things. And everyone was always very, wanting to pray over people. I mean, prayer circles where people were like putting their hands on people. It was very different than what I grew up in. And
So far, nothing you have shared would lead me to believe you are a victim of a cult. This merely seems to be a church that was not the right fit for you. Quite possibly a situation where you were a raging witch, and lost friends much like you do in every other aspect of your life.
it was very weird. And the people that knew me in my life were very taken aback by this sort of presentation, because what I was starting to espouse and say and talk about, my feed on Facebook and on Twitter at the time, it was all about God, and I was writing passages, and I was sharing Psalms and Proverbs, and I was listening to Bethel music and Hillsong. And if you know anything about
This simply sounds to me like you embraced your newfound venture. Not a cult.
Bethel. I mean, come on. I was rocking to Bethel music, and this is like a faith healing church. I didn't even know that that's what they did, but that's what we listened to at church. And it didn't even hit me until it was a very slow process where I found myself more and more falling away from myself and getting more and more surrounded. And the further I got in, the more the church wanted from me. So,
Catherine, is this the point in which you try to create the illusion that you had to somehow escape this church in your small Minnesota town?
it was make sure that you're volunteering, make sure that you're tithing at least, X%, make sure that you're involved in your groups. And so it got to a point where I was at church on Sundays, groups on Mondays, groups on Wednesdays. I did youth group for a while. I was doing Meals on Wheels with them. I was volunteering. I was helping with getting Sunday school stuff ready.
Where was the baby then?
I was walking people and greeting people at church and taking their kids to Sunday school. I was like leading Bible studies. I somehow got into this position where I don't even know. All I remember wanting was community, and I suddenly was like so deep into something that I didn't even know what it was.
Judging by your behavior online as a Crackerbox reporter, you seem to always overinvest yourself and include yourself in whatever your current interest is at the time. This is not shocking at all.
And the only friends that I had anymore were within the church, and they were like, yes, just hang out with your friends. Yes, just hang out with us. Make your community here. Don't worry about the outside.
Wait, did you not just say at the start of this video that you had just moved there and had no friends at all? And the only potential friends were part of the church.
I didn't even know what it was. And the only friends that I had anymore were within the church. And they were like, yes, just hang out with your friends. Yes, just hang out with us. Make your community here. Don't worry about the outside world. Your family is here. And it was presented in such a way that you didn't even think about how you might be starting to isolate yourself from everyone else around you, because your beliefs are kind of like, I remember just being like, God is with me everywhere. Just like I felt intoxicated by the Spirit.
Well, I suppose it is better than 4 bottles of wine each day.
That's what it was, which is kind of how the Pentecostal church works. And you feel so drunk on it that you just want it all the time, even though it's not, I don't even know if it's real. But I remember my parents just being like, I don't even know who you are. One of my best friends was just like, who are you? And like,
wait, I thought you had said that your parents were strict parents and strict Catholics. So much so that your father beat you. Do you not remember saying that, Catherine?
Going to family events and feeling like I was better than everyone because I was at church, going to Bible studies and dissecting what everyone else was doing out in the world that wasn't Christian or wasn't walking in our faith, criticizing people, analyzing how they're not being like God.
Oh. So the same exact thing you do now. Except to Christians.
And I started to realize slowly but surely that everything that I had once held dear to me, because the pastors said, you don't need college education, you don't need public schools, women, you don't need to work out of the home. I quit my job during this time, mind you. Yeah, I did. I became a stay-at-home mom. That was never my plan.
Do you truly just completely forget the lies that you tell? I thought you quit your job before this. I thought you left your job to be this wonderful stay-at-home mother to your medically fragile child.
Husbands, don't be friends with men. Let your husband sleep. I mean, I became like Betty Homemaker. It was like I was in the Twilight Zone. And I remember one day feeling really disenchanted because I noticed after a couple of years that everything in the church got weirder and weirder. The pastor, I think he got into an argument with one of the other pastors and kicked him out, but it was very abruptly. And I remember I sat down with the pastor that left, and he just said, I want to be a part of a church that does more for the community.
Wait. But you just gave us an entire list of all of the community service you were doing on behalf of the church.
And I was like, because this church always said that we were doing things for the community. And then I started to think about it, and I was like, wait a minute. What do we do for the community? Nothing. Anytime they had something to do for the community, like backpacks for kids, where you would get a backpack for like a kid and that couldn't afford it, or say like a Christmas tree where you give gifts to kids or families that you like sponsor a child, the church never sponsored it. We did. So a church would just coordinate it, and then we paid for everything.
Oh, I am beginning to see the direction this is heading.
They had different events that we could volunteer for that were for other events, but the church didn't pay for it or sponsor it. So there wasn't really a community outreach, in fact, at all. There wasn't any sort of services set up for families. There was nothing set up for families for children with special needs. There was no services or support for women or really for anything. And
Catherine, this entire video reads like a negative Google business review. None of this equates to being the survivor of a cult.
which was very different because if you think about the Catholic Church, it's very, they have the Catholic Charities. So when he said that, I started to look inward and I thought, oh my God, there is nothing going on here. Like, what are we doing? And then when family members or people were struggling, I noticed that within the community that nobody was helping these people. So when
How much money did they deny you when you requested it? She goes on for some time, over-focused on money. Let us continue on to her story of leaving this victimizing, evil cult.
when a member of the church was struggling financially or something, the church wasn't offering to help them, or if they did, it was very minimal. And I remember sitting there listening to the pastor, and he was talking about how he wanted to build this humongous church, and he got jealous of other pastors who were able to build such successful churches, and that he would see them in their cars and he would want those cars, but he would say, I'm not going to have one of those cars. I'm not going to do that. You'll never have to worry about it. You'll never have to worry about what I take for this, what I take for that. But during this time, they decided they wanted to build a church because we were still staying in that middle school, and the
Was it not a high school?
disclosures for the money was so bizarre. Like, we didn't know what people were making. We were just supposed to know the pastor's wife was doing the books, which seemed weird to me. They started asking us for not only tithing, but a percentage on top of that to pledge to help them build this building. So more and more the demands for money got higher and higher and higher, with no sort of understanding about where the money was going and what it was going to, because the money, they didn't have that many expenses at the time, and the money was not going back to the community at this point because they weren't doing outreach or any sort of charity. And they kept saying, well, we'll do more charity once we get there. The only goal that this church had was to bring more people to Jesus. So that's all he wanted, was to save you. And then once you got there, there was nothing there.
Why do I have a horrid feeling that you try to infiltrate their financial information? And in doing so cause some sort of turmoil between yourself and the church? And why, Catherine, would any of this be your business? This is not a cult, Catherine. If you were not happy, then leave.
Sermon was the same all the year after year. They did the same series over and over and over again because they said that they just had to keep making it highlight and easy for people to come in. And then they wanted you to help them bring people in, invite your friends, make sure they come here. And then once you got there, there was this sort of emptiness of what next, right?
This sounds more like the complaints of a narcissist with control issues.
And you start becoming part of this machine, and you're slowly separating yourself from everyone around you. And then you've got a pastor that has no accountability. There's no denomination around him, no rules. He kicks out the other pastor. And then, drunk on power, anytime one of the members says to him, what about these? Could you do something different here? Could we add services here? Or could we do this? Or could we do that? It was always met by, if this is not how you like it, you can leave. This is my church and this is what we're going to do. And I remember asking him one time, like, how do people become pastors? Like, what is what are the credentials or what is the process? And he went through a program in a Pentecostal church, mind you. And so but there was no females that were leading. And although we would never say it, that was.
You are truly reaching to insert yourself into the fundamental Christian victim narrative.
Very understood that women were not to be pastors. And so slowly I realized that I had joined almost like a cult. But I remember this sort of come to realization with my husband, and I said, I can't do this anymore. We were 3 years in, we were thousands of dollars of donations and tithing and hours of sweat and tears of volunteering. And I remember saying to him, I think we're like in a cult. And
wait, you said they had no outreach programs.
It was the craziest experience. Like, we left, and it wasn't like we had to flee for our lives, but we lost everything. It was insane. We had become isolated from all of our outside friends because we had ingrained and sculpted our life around these group of people, assuming that if we left, it wouldn't be a big deal. These people would still be our friends. We had spent so much time with them. They were going to be there for us. That's what this was about, right? Wrong. When I started voicing my concerns and my doubts, it was met with, you can't leave.
Catherine, we all are well aware of the lack of self-control you have when voicing your own concerns. It is much more likely they told you to get the fuck out.
But I also know that sometimes when people are so heavy in something, they just need a bit of kindness. And so I realized that earlier today I did a video where I shared my conversation with Morgan, and everyone thought, oh, you're subscribing to her, you're co-signing what she believes, you're taking her side. And I was like thinking, no, I'm not taking her side. I'm just being a human and offering a little bit of compassion and saying, if we want to help someone open their mind, the best thing that we can do is be kind to them and not remind them all of the bad things they've said.
Oh, you can fuck right off, Catherine. Thank you for watching my video. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned for part 2.